When you've had an unhappy marriage, and we've disappointed millions of people by getting a divorce. I think they want you to run off in a week. When I spoke with Lucille Ball, I was nervous. She rarely talked about the breakup of her famous marriage to Desi Arnaz, and I wasn't sure how to bring it up. She was, after all, going to be sitting right next to her second husband, comedian Gary Morton, and I assumed that Desi was not their favorite subject. But she had no problem talking about him. In fact, she was eager to discuss her ex-husband, and did so in a frank manner that was somewhat shocking to the millions who had only known them as that zany, happy couple, the Ricardos. In a moment, a great Lucille Ball, though she grew up in a small town in upstate New York, Lucille Ball loved Hollywood. She lived in this elegant Beverly Hills mansion for over 30 years from 1961 until her death. She enjoyed the luxuries of her legendary fortune with her second husband, Gary Morton, a producer, former comedian, and her most trusted friend. This was Gary's and Lucy's bedroom on the second floor, and this, the pink bathroom that Gary built, is a surprise for Lucy when she was on location. This is also the home where she had lived with Desi Arnaz. Their work together fills volumes of scripts, all of which were stored in the house, Marbury. This is a very comfortable room. This is your favorite? Oh yes. Yeah, there's always one room you live in, play games there, and the plants grow better and everything. But in here we show pictures. We have 85,000 feet of seriously movie. Alright, something called Fat Little Cowboy, when they wearing starring my children when they were, let's see, Jessie was about 2.5, almost 3, and Lucy was 4. But she of course was always telling all I could do, pushing him around, making sure that he did they clothes. Now very good, they ever were. Yeah, really much. During their 20 years of marriage, Desi Arnaz and Lucille Ball had 2 children, a daughter Lucy in 1951, and Desi Jr. came 2 years later. They were the great joy of Lucy's life. She encouraged their interest in show business, and as teenagers they joined her in a final TV series, Here's Lucy. She often said she was a firm believer in nepotism. Lucy was so good at being funny that people forget she was also a great beauty. In fact, it was her looks that got her in the door, first as a model, and then as an actress in B-movies. In 1940 she appeared in a movie with a Cuban singer who would eventually steal her heart. They were married in November of the year, and 10 years later they approached CBS about doing a sitcom loosely based on their marriage. Together they called it I Love Lucy. Despite strong prejudice against Latin Americans, Desi Arnaz built the empire known as Desilu Studios from the ground up, and gained a reputation as one of the smartest businessmen in Hollywood. There has never been a success like Lucy. She was on CBS for 23 consecutive years, and won 4 Emmys and countless other awards. By anyone's measure, she was the queen of comedy. On camera, Lucy and Ricky Ricardo exaggerated marital troubles, and made us all laugh. The public thought they were the perfect match. Off camera, the marriage fell apart in 1960. Lucy filed for divorce amidst allegations that Desi drank too much and cheated on her. America was heartbroken, so apparently was Lucy, but they managed to remain friends until his death in 1986. When I sat down with Lucy and Gary, I wasn't sure what to expect. She was 66 at the time, Desi was still alive, and the subject of her first marriage was still painful. I mean, when you and Desi were married, you had everything. He had nothing. He had his own band, and he was in a play in New York when he was a kid. Where you were married, but they was married at the SIP, and we built up a lot of things, but thinking while they were building, they would not believe that he was doing the building, and he was doing this successful building, a very well-run empire. I was doing the acting and having the children. I had no part of it. I took that on much later, but I knew what he had suffered really and how he did not deserve that, and just because he was Cuban and once a bongo player did not warrant calling him any of those names, and he worked very hard and got a lot of respect for what he did, and they forgot about that. You had the success, the marriage looked perfect, it was everything, and then it felt that was his problem, and I've heard you were devastated. I couldn't understand it any more than you know, for the same reason you're asking the question. Seems like we had everything. People still don't understand. I don't either. Oh, I think that's past, that's certainly power. Think it's best, but we certainly did have everything, and worked very hard to get it, and 2 beautiful children, and the what else can you ask for? And I think if Jesse were here right now, he would agree that it was. But when we're talking about the marriage, you had said I didn't make the same marriage mistake twice. This marriage is very different. This man is very good. Thank you, it's not a loser. I married a loser before that. You could win, hi, I say he could work very hard. He was brilliant. but he had to lose this rent suite. I like getting up in a more sober man, sweet and generous, overly generous, but he had to lose. He had to fail at everything that he built up. Everything he built, he had to break down. He still claims he's the same way, and if this marriage itself, very different, yes, very different. Oh, we have a home that is lived in. We had many houses before, but we didn't have a home. But he was ever in. Well, I think together we take care of one another. When she's down, I carry it up. Feeling good. Gary has for a long time, thank you. Well, he just assumed that role beautifully, and I was grateful for it, and I encouraged it. And in many, many ways, I don't think he's even aware if he has responsibilities. I think he did, he's not even aware of. When I found out the kind of man I had married, it takes time, you know, you're not for sure. I'd only known him a year, and I hadn't thought about it for a year, and I really didn't want to get married again. I had 2 beautiful children, and when you've had an unhappy marriage, and you've disappointed millions of people by getting a divorce, you know, I think more than what you don't run off in a week. Besides, I didn't want to take a man who seemed to be his own man. I didn't want anything to happen to that wonderful feeling that he had, that real wonderful ego, and he played it in any way. I didn't want thing to happen to that. Did you ever worry you're a couple of years old, and he'd look at somebody else? Oh, I had that, I've had that, I've been, you know what? No, that's why I didn't worry. I'd heard that, you know, he had quite a life before all that. I didn't really worry about that. No, I can't say that I did. I didn't at the time. I thought one sign of that. Goodbye, whomever. One thing I loved about him is that he likes to take his time off. He really appreciates it with his golf. He's a fine golfer and always has been. And he was, I think, quite pleased when he found out that I didn't mind him going up to the club or going to Palm Springs or wherever to play golf at any time that he wanted to. Now, from the very beginning, he always called. Nobody asked him to. He never said that. Be sure and call, I want to hear, and all that. Never once. And through the years, he just always says, I've always known where he was. He's always known where I was. There've been no games being played, and I was pretty used to a lot of games, and I'm not talking about Scrabble. Do you make each other laugh? Yeah. Music said, but you said I Lucille Ball. I don't think funny and I'm not funny. I'm these funny, but I'm not. I don't think funny. I can do funny things that other people write down in detail, tell me how to do them, but I really don't think funny. He doesn't. Well, she'll do what we call Lucyisms. Things from my show, you know, like always says, oh Lucy, that's crazy Lucy. Look at Lucy, she'll walk into a wall. But she'll do little things like that. I feel that decide on dinner and forget the toast. And it's been laying there, it's this big by the time it comes to me, and I forget the roast though, and toast, that's what I get. Well, what she does well, why don't I make that what you like, is chopped chicken liver. That's all right. I don't know, my mother's watching, but I've learned from your mother, girl. However, oh Lucyism, I was making chopped chicken liver. It takes a couple of hours to make a huge dish. We were expecting some guests, and I was doing fine, and I was right on time. And I tasted it, and he did salt, and I already had it in dish, but it wasn't too late if I hadn't put the egg yolks on the top. So I took the big salt thing, and I went like this, and the top came off, and the entire thing looked like a snowbank. And they're practically driving in the driveway. I just didn't know what to do. So I quickly did the worst thing you can think of. I rinsed it. Well, then all this salt went right straight through it, you know, made notes in. So we went out. What's her best quality, and what's your worst quality? Our best quality is her long, and I love her warmth, and her compassion for other people, a consideration of other people. Can't think of, I really can. I mean, it sounds, I know what I don't like. You take naps. Oh yeah, she has a thing about me taking naps. Oh yeah. I feel, I'd love to take math. I don't like anyone who can take a nap. I hear that you're very influenced by Norman Vincent Peale, the progress father, Frank, the man himself and his thinking. What does it do? What do you live by? What's your philosophy? Is it daily religion? I like it because it works for you every day. You can use it right now from here to there. Every morning. It's I can if I wish I can't. Lucy, after 25 years of doing the weekly series, you stopped in 1974. Then, Methods of Life. You got up in the morning and you didn't have to run to work. Dramatic, very well. For the first 3 or 4 months I was in limbo. I was just in shock. I loved getting up and going to work. We did because I was depressed. I was in such a depression that the doctor said, you've got to take her away. You've got to find something that she wants to do, and it wasn't anything I wanted to do but go back to work. Why'd you leave? Oh, I've been on long enough, I thought, and I've kind of always prided myself on knowing when to get off, and I felt that really I had stayed out about 4 or 5 years longer than I planned, which happened because of the children's coming on our show and kind of wanting them to get their wings and fly off on their own, which they did, and as soon as they did that, then I really quit. But I've been planning it for 5 years. I just felt that I doubt, I've grown that stage. And also with the new shows, I began to feel a little old-fashioned. Let me ask about that. With Lucy today, Zane, a young woman, and really the I Love Lucy, the crazy zany lady, married to the Cuban band leader, but that shall work today. I can't the touch me dancer. Now apparently they're getting a little tired of the new stuff, and they are appreciative of what they already know about, and want again. Lucia worked in 77 countries that she distributes the Lucy Show, and Here's Lucy, and I Love Lucy, so it's funny all over the world, and that's the way I feel about the Yuma. Lucy's humor can go on and on. There's no limit to anybody that's funny. Lucy was all Lucy because I always felt that they needed their days. The public needed a show that had a beginning, a middle, and a happy ending, and something they should want, could depend on, and I think it's become more important to them now. That's why they're tuning in so regularly day and night, because they can depend on those days. They see things that are, they're trying to make entertainment out of newsreels, what we see in the news which is not very peppy these days. And they're building shows around them, and to me that's not entertainment. Do you watch yourself? Do you watch the really lot I Love Lucy? No, I never have really watched them recently. I've caught some of them inadvertently, so they twirling in a dial. Well, I feel about the funny-looking hair doing a funny-looking. I look like I was forever pregnant, because I was either having one or just getting rid of one, but I know that they were well written, and we had a wonderful time doing them, and I think it shows. That is the essence of our comedy. Those early I Love Lucy gave me my education. And the whole thing, did you have trouble selling those first I Love Lucy? No, I would have trouble selling them because they were, the concept. I heard that when you first came to CBS with the Cuban band leader, and though they always think they didn't want to buy Desi as my husband, and I said, why not? He is. I said, well, Cuban, and we want an American. So we got together and went out in Portable for a few weeks to see how they accepted us. Then they did. When I came back, I insisted. That's all I said. I expected to only do the show for a year, and then have some home movies to show the baby that I had just had, when she grew up, and no one who knew there was going to go on this long, or get that big, or the business with snowballs. My success was never labeled success by anyone close to me. It was just go to work and do a good job, get the show out, learn how to do it. You do it so the best of it's, the best that it can be done, and teach others how to do it, because it was, as I say, of a new way of doing things. I didn't have time to think of being a success personally. If the show was doing well, that was good. It's been said that you're very tough to work for, are you? Are you no perfectionist? I have decided his attention to detail, which I'm very proud of, and that's the way I learned my craft. That's one thing that Second thing I think that I'm proudest of, that I've learned my craft. The other thing that I'm proud of is that I've had time with my children, and that my children are doing what they want to do and doing it successfully. And I think Gary's the one, I'm very happy. I read that Lucy is an overprotective mother. I found that she sometimes gets overly protective to her children. She's had a late life, and it was her whole world. The children 8 still are. They're very important, and they're very, very fortunate. She's very thoughts are. They're wonderful kids. But I remember when little Desi was born, and it was the most important event that happened in the country. And I remember reading that more people watched when Desi was supposedly born on the program than watched the Dwight Eisenhower's inauguration, or than what Elizabeth's coronation. Yeah, tell us what that time was like for you. I wasn't aware of all. They didn't tell me all that. First of all, when you have cesarean, you're not that wide awake, for for the next 3 hours that takes 3-4 days before there's major, And so I was just concerned that the baby was healthy. And then later I found out the pure are there that cause, and how nice there was no happy. Everybody was about it. And of course the fact that we were documented by our show, and being on the night he was born, on the morning of January 19th, in the show was that night. And that could be arranged because it was a planned cesarean, and it just happened to fall out of money. You are almost 40 when your first child was born. 39. It must have been the most fantastic thing, right? Do you think in retrospect that it matters that it was a good thing or a bad thing that you wanted the child so badly that you were that age when the child was born? No one warned me that I know now that I was taking a risk. But my doctor at the time, He didn't frighten me in any way. I found out that I was taking a risk. Later, I read somewhere that when, at that time, little Lucy was born, that you were so happy you cried so much, but the doctor said he wouldn't let you have the baby because you were going to cry all over. Though they did, because I think they had to take the baby away from me, because every time they bring her in I'd cry, and it hurt. You know, when you've had cesarean. She was an unexpected cesarean, and it was a tough operation, and every time they brought her in, I would cry, so that I couldn't hold her. And then once that burped her and I booked her right up out of the blanket and she went up on the top of the bed, I tried to raise her up. I didn't have the strength, and I might like that she went right out of the blanket, like raising them. But you adore those kids, don't you? Sure. I'd also heard that when Lucy was born, that you heard about the before she was born, that you heard that you were pregnant on the radio, that you hadn't known. Yes, that one I lost. But I got pregnant and know that I was pregnant. We went out into vaudeville. This is one. We went into Vulnerable to find out if the public or the accepted SE, as my husband, the full event of the television series, and I wasn't feeling well, and we opened in Chicago and got into New York. I thought I'd better see a doctor. I had no idea that I was pregnant, because I hadn't been and we'd been married over 9 years, but I want to see a doctor, and he said, I think your pride, said Europe, gotta be putting you on. We'll take a test. That was Thursday, and I supposed to get the results Monday. And Sunday night we heard it on Walter Winchell, and we reach in our separate dressing rooms, and we met in the hall says it's true. Because we know that if Winchell said it was true, that he had spies in the lab, but we really found it out on the radio. I just think it's an unusual situation. I mean, it's tough enough for kids that when they grow up, and then to have this sort of spooky thing of seeing your parents and seeing yourself born on television and all of that trend. Oh, they're very nice. They're late as they got older. It's not to understand the difference between reality and film, and you've had to understand it in your life probably much more than most people. The difference between reality and film because you had to live for many years, still do with another image, with an image of a marriage. I used it when I was unhappy. What do you mean? Well, it was always happy in our story. It was always happy pretending until you became. I had to pretend, but it helped. Lucille Ball died after heart surgery in 1989. But her place in Hollywood history had been determined long before her death. Her name is now tossed about the same sentences with Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton, and she is widely recognized as the most influential woman from the early days of television. That probably means less to her than the fact that she will continue to be watched over and over again by new generations of viewers. Like all great talents, she wears well.